Hey, it's Yassine here, and it's been a while since I last saw you, but I'm back at it again with another exciting season. So, welcome to the third season of FXL. We've got a lot of brand new episodes coming your way. In the first season, if you remember, we looked at the key issues that field service leaders face in our industry. And then on the second season, we got into the nitty gritty of operational excellence for every stage of the order to cash work stream. And now, for this third season, we want to zoom out a bit and look at one of the biggest trends that's taking place right now in our industry. And that is mergers and acquisitions, or more specifically, how private equity is building industry giants and reshaping the landscape in the trades. And to do that, joining me on the podcast this season is Gyner Ozgul, whose experience in M&A and private equity is at a whole another level. Currently serving as the CEO of Perimeter Roofing and a board advisor for multiple growth companies, including Origo. He's been the deal architect of more than 30 acquisitions over the past 5 years and is now building a brand new private equity-backed platform in the roofing vertical. I couldn't be more excited to have him as my co-host for this season. Gyner, welcome to the show, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Yassine. And third time's a charm. I'm in the third season, so
Absolutely. As I said, I couldn't be more excited to have you as my co-host this season. You bring a ton of experience. I've personally learned from you. I look at you as my mentor, and I've definitely learned a lot from you over the years. But for those who are meeting you for the first time, could you give us a little bit more background on your experience in field services and private equity?
yeah. So field services, total of 30-odd-ish years.
Amazing.
Where I got my namesake was in food service. So, the first 10, 11 years I worked in actual restaurants. I started off as, just a lot of times people say, well, how do you get to be a CEO? Well, I started as an hourly employee at a Burger King 3 blocks from my house. So, and I spent 11 years in that while I was going to school and, worked my way through becoming a regional operations manager there. And then I shifted to kitchen repair back in 2003. And I spent the better part of the next two decades, so 20 years up through 2023 in what now is a company called SmartCare. I spent a lot of time in kitchen repair and I built a lot of relationships there with service. So, so for me, it was time to try something new in service. So now I'm on the service of residential roofing side. I know that seems like a leap from kitchens to roofs, but at the end of the day, customers' expectations of great service and managing teams is really important. The last 8 years or so, since about 2016, SmartCare was a business called Equipment Care within a company called Ecolab.
Yes, Ecolab.
And back in 2016, they made a decision to sell it to private equity. So the better part of the last almost 8 years, I've been in private equity with both knowing a number of private equities, but also working through them as a portfolio company. So just a little bit of where does the experience come from? Very fortunate with that. Those private equities were great partners. My educational experience up until this point comes from them, and there's some kudos back to them if they listen to this podcast.
Absolutely. From the kitchen to the boardroom to the roof. Been quite a journey. And I had the honor to have a front seat view of your journey growing SmartCare into an industry giant now. And, and I, have the opportunity now to watch you build a brand new platform in the roofing vertical. So I'm grateful to have you on the show and learn from you. So the question we're looking to answer this season is, why focus on private equity? And how is it shaping the field service industry? And to throw at you some stats, private equity firms have grown exponentially over the years. During the 90s, there were probably only about 300 private equity firms in the US. But fast forward to today, you can find over 4,500 private equity firms in almost every single sector, with over $8.2 trillion in assets under management. So to put it in context, that's a third of the U.S. economy, right? The U.S. economy is about $25 trillion a year GDP. That's a third of the U.S. economy influenced by private equity. And if that wasn't impressive enough, as of the end of 2023, private equity firms in the United States alone had accumulated about $2.5 trillion in dry powder, right? Ready to be invested in acquiring companies and assets. So that's a lot of moolah. So Gyner, as a private equity operator, how have you experienced the growth of private equity in our industry?
What I'd say is, like, I'll start from the way on the positive side, because everybody has different perspectives of private equity, right? Here's my perspective. They go with all of them that I've worked with and I've interacted with, their primary intent is to build great business platforms.
Absolutely.
That's always the leading case, right? How do you build businesses that are sustainable and grow and provide value to an end market, right?
Yes.
And, look, the good thing about the American economy in that same parallel time frame that you're talking about, the growth of private equities, right, is, the economy expanded enough where a lot of these end market verticals just have a lot of very great entrepreneurial spirits developing great businesses. And the fragmentation of a lot of these markets is pretty broad, right? So there's a like of an intersection happening of, this explosive growth of an economy in the last 30 years, the growth of private equity sectors, and the intersection of that on how do we build great businesses then that can offer kind of bigger solutions. And we can talk about that in later episodes, bigger, better solutions to end customers in different markets and different verticals.
Absolutely. It's been a booming industry, especially in, from a financial services perspective. A lot of people, watch Shark Tank and, all they know is really like venture capitalists, right? People who invest in startups, but they don't know that, private equity is like, 10x, 20x bigger than venture capitalists. And really almost every business most businesses you come across, if you walk, down the street, you can, probably, 1 out of every 3 to 4 businesses is owned by private equity. But you wouldn't know that.
Yeah. No one talks about it. And look, there's a human factor here too, right? We all hear about the headlines of private equity in the news, but your point is more valid. There's more good happening in the world of private equity than there's not. You just don't hear about it because most of the time it just happens, and the good things happen and aggregation happens, and you see the outputs of that, right, in the world. Yeah. And I would tell you, just interacting with a number of these private equity groups, but more importantly, the people in them, they're really good people. They're very smart business people. They really understand the working thesis. They want to deliver something transformative and differentiated to the market. So it's actually, my opinion, right? My opinion is it's really good for business in America, and it's really good for what it provides as value to the end consumer.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, what sells in the news is fear-based headlines and crisis. But the fact of the matter is, there's more good happening in this world, beyond what's showing up on the screen. And that's the goal of this podcast, to shine a light on the role of private equity and how it's transforming most verticals, I would want to say, in field services. But then this begs the question, Gyner, why the trades? Why is private equity so interested in our industry?
Well, service trades, typically, the way I view it is, fragmentation aside. So there's always the first gate is always how fragmented is the marketplace and how many players are there in the marketplace, right? The second gate is, hey, like, this service is really valuable in that end market. So in repair businesses, service-based repair businesses, using that as a general term for a second, somebody can't live without a roof on their house, as an example, in my current business. They just can't, right? So that's a valuable service. And on top of that, you have these skilled trades where bringing them together and offering scale can do a lot more potentially for homeowners, right? Because now you have a business like in roofing, as an example, where I can provide you warranties of a company that's going to be here decades from now, right? So we're not going to go up and disappear, right? And a lot of these service companies offer the same at scale, aggregating. So you ask the very specific question, why service or why trades? Because it makes sense to aggregate them and provide the end consumer scaled value, right?
Mm,
Scale differentiated value that's really not impossible to get locally because, quite frankly, a lot of these smaller companies that we buy are great operators that provide really good value to customers. But we want to figure out a way to take those best practices and nationalize them
national.
or
Yep.
scale them and say, okay, how can we make this a great company that, somebody from Seattle to Atlanta can have a great experience with a company?
Absolutely, and that's more important, especially in the commercial or industrial segment of field services, but also in the residential. When you have scale, when you have the share of knowledge, the infrastructure, the level of service, the quality. It's a whole another level when you're at a national scale, and it also has its own challenges, which we'll get to talk about it. But as you heard from Gyner, private equity is hot on the trades, and we're only going to see more and more M&A activity over the next few years, and that's why I'm so excited about recording this new series. We're going to be experimenting with some new formats to keep the content engaging and novel. So we're going to be rotating through three different types of podcast formats, Gyner and I. The first format is going to be what I'm calling tactical M&A sessions, where we're going to be drawing on Gyner's experience in the field and answering key questions like, hey, if you're a new platform company, how do you become acquisition ready? Or if you're a business owner looking to find a private equity partner and looking to exit, how do you maximize valuation? How do you pick the right equity partner, private equity partner, and so forth? Or if you're an existing platform and you're looking to scale, well, how do you leverage, for instance, shared services to consolidate redundant functions and streamline your processes? Or how do you build your M&A function? Or how do you grow your leadership team for each stage of your private equity cycle? So then the second format is going to be where we bring on guests with diverse backgrounds to share their M&A experience, such as C-suite executives, CFOs, COOs, CTOs at different active portfolio companies, owners who have recently exited their business, and ask them about their experience working with private equity, and also bring on a lot of M&A practitioners who may not get the credit or the light that they deserve in building this amazing industry, and who work with private equity companies. And then the third format, which I'm pretty excited about, we're calling it the Dealroom episodes, where we look at different verticals in field service and like zoom in and share our thoughts on the M&A activity happening in the market, and zoom in on the major acquirers in that vertical and kind of try to break down their strategy. How are they thinking about their acquisition strategy? What about their integration strategy? And who's in, who's out? How big the market is, and size up all the different verticals across field services. So, Gyner, aside from what I've mentioned, why should field service executives tune in for this podcast series?
Well, besides your debonair attitude, I mean, I don't know, that sells a lot. Actually, here's what I'd say. We want to try our best between Yassine and myself to make this real for you, to make it feel like the content has value, to make it feel like the content comes from a real place, right?
Yes.
Will we get it right all the time? Probably not. But we're gonna, our job is the same, to provide you value in your journey, to help understand the space better and really listen in, and hopefully you take a couple things away from it to you and your teams and say, hey, that's something I found really interesting. So the content's nimble, as Yassine said, we got 3 areas we're looking at, and I think that's important for us to rotate and be fresh all the time with the group, so you could listen to something new that maybe you haven't heard before. But we're going to have a lot of fun, and hopefully we can teach you something you haven't heard before.
Absolutely, and I love what you shared there, Gyner. You find a lot of communities, podcasts, content on private equity, and you also find a lot of content out there on LinkedIn and other places about field services, but no one brought these two together. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be very specific in terms of the audience we're addressing and the community hint we're trying to build. So there will be other exciting announcements we'll be making as we progress in this series and try to bring the community together and share and mastermind and share best practices and involve the community in these in creating this content. So so there you have it. I hope this conversation
awesome.
gave you a taste of what to expect this season. If you want to make sure not to miss out on any new episodes, make sure to follow our FXL LinkedIn page. Give me, Gyner, a follow on our LinkedIn personal profiles, and make sure to click on the notification bell at the top. And stay tuned for the release of our very next episode. But until then, make your days great, and I'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.